Sarah thought she was being neighborly when she let the woman's daughter use her pool just this once. But when she discovered the elaborate lie that had been spinning for weeks complete with stolen mail, forged documents, and a neighborhood-wide, she was dealing with a master manipulator who had turned Sarah's own kindness into a weapon. And when the police arrived at the neighborhood barbecue, the woman's final desperate gambit would expose secrets that would shatter more than just one family's trust. Sarah Martinez had always prided herself on being the kind of neighbor who looked out for others. After 15 years in Maple Grove Estates, she knew every family on Willowbrook drive their schedules, their struggles, their small triumphs, which is why the sight of a young girl swimming alone in her backyard pool at 7 in the morning struck her as so completely wrong. She stood at her kitchen window, coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips, watching the child's methodical laps. The girl couldn't be more than 10, her dark hair streaming behind her as she moved through the chlorinated water with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing this for weeks. Tom, Sarah, called to her husband who was hunched over his laptop. At the dining table, already deep into his work emails, "Come look at this." Tom Martinez glanced up, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. "What is it, honey?" "There's a kid in our pool." That got his attention. Tom pushed back from the table, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "What do you mean, there's a kid in our pool?" Sarah didn't answer. She was too busy watching the girl execute a perfect flip turn at the shallow end, her small body rotating with practiced precision. This wasn't some neighborhood kid sneaking in for a quick swim. This was someone who'd been here before many times before. Tom joined her at the window, his 6-foot frame casting a shadow across the granite countertop. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "How long has she been out there?" "I don't know. I just noticed her when I came down to start the coffee." Sarah's voice carried a note of bewilderment that made Tom's stomach tighten. In all their years of marriage, he'd rarely seen his wife genuinely confused. Sarah was a planner, a list maker, someone who noticed everything. The fact that this had somehow escaped her attention felt ominous. "Maybe she's with the Jensen kids," Tom suggested, though even as he said it, he knew it didn't make sense. The Jensens lived 3 houses down, and their children were all teenagers now. Besides, none of them had ever used the Martinez pool without explicit permission. Sarah shook her head. "I've never seen her before in my life." They watched in silence as the girl completed another lap, her strokes steady and rhythmic. She was wearing a faded pink one-piece swimsuit that had seen better days, and her hair was pulled back in a ponytail secured with what looked like a rubber band. Everything about her suggested careful preparation, not spontaneous mischief. "Should we go out there?" Tom asked. "Give me a minute." Sarah set down her coffee mug and moved to the sliding glass door that led to their deck. She could feel her heart beating faster, though she couldn't quite articulate why. Something about the girl's presence felt more significant than simple trespassing. The pool area was Sarah's sanctuary. She'd spent months planning the landscaping, coordinating with contractors to install the saltwater system, selecting the perfect shade of blue for the ceramic tiles. The space was surrounded by a 6-foot privacy fence with a locked gate that connected to their driveway. Getting in required either a key or considerable effort to climb over. Sarah stepped onto the deck, her bare feet registering the cool morning air. "Excuse me," she called out, keeping her voice gentle but firm. The girl stopped mid-stroke, her head popping up near the center of the pool. Up close, Sarah could see she was older than she'd initially thought, maybe 12 or 13, with large brown eyes and olive skin that suggested Hispanic heritage. The child treaded water with easy confidence, showing no signs of panic or embarrassment at being discovered. "Hi," the girl said simply, as if this were the most normal conversation in the world. "Hi there," Sarah replied, moving to the edge of the pool. "I'm Sarah. I live here." "What's your name?" "Isabella." The girl's voice was clear and steady, tinged with just a hint of accent. "But everyone calls me Bella." "Bella. That's a pretty name." Sarah crouched down, bringing herself closer to the girl's eye level. "Can you tell me how you got into my backyard? Through the gate?" Bella's response was matter-of-fact, as if Sarah had asked her to explain something obvious. "The gate is locked, sweetheart." "Not always." Bella swam closer to the pool's edge, her movements unhurried. "Sometimes people forget to lock it." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. She was meticulous about pool safety. especially since the neighborhood had several young children. The gate was equipped with a spring-loaded mechanism that automatically locked whenever it closed. Someone would have to deliberately disable it or prop it open. "Bella, where are your parents?" "My mom is at work. She starts really early." The girl's explanation came readily, as if she'd prepared for this question. "She said it was okay for me to swim here while she's gone." "Your mom said it was okay." Sarah's voice remained calm, but she could feel her confusion deepening into something more troubling. "When did she say that?" "A few weeks ago. She talked to you about it, remember?" Sarah's mind raced through her recent conversations with neighbors. She'd spoken with Mrs. Chen about the package delivery mix-up, helped the Kowalskis troubleshoot their sprinkler system, and chatted with the new family at the end of the street about their renovations. But she couldn't recall any conversation about pool access, especially not one involving a child she'd never met. "Bella, I think there might be some confusion. I don't remember talking to your mom about this." The girl's expression shifted slightly, the first crack in her composed demeanor. "But she showed me the key," she said. "She has the key to your gate." Sarah's blood ran cold. There were only 3 keys to the pool gate, one on her keychain, one on Tom's, and one hidden in a lockbox mounted on the fence post. The lockbox was camouflaged to look like a decorative stone, and its location was known only to Sarah. "What does your mom look like, Bella?" "She's really pretty. She has long dark hair, and she wears it in a braid sometimes. She's tall, taller than you, and she has a scar on her hand right here." Bella held up her left hand, indicating a spot near her thumb. The description meant nothing to Sarah, but the specificity of it, especially the detail about the scar, suggested the girl wasn't making it up on the spot. Someone had coached her. "What's your mom's name?" "Carmen. Carmen Reyes." Sarah ran through her mental catalog of neighborhood residents. She knew every family on Willowbrook Drive and several streets beyond. There was no Carmen Reyes anywhere in their immediate area. "Bella, where do you live?" "Over there," the girl said, pointing vaguely toward the back of the property, "in the White House with the blue door." Sarah followed the direction of the girl's gesture. Beyond the pool fence, she could see the roof lines of several houses, but none of them were white with blue doors. The properties that backed up to theirs were all part of a different subdivision, accessed through a separate entrance nearly a mile away. "Sweetheart, I need you to get out of the pool now," Sarah said, her voice taking on a new urgency. "Let's call your mom and sort this out." "But I'm not done with my laps," Bella protested. "I always do 50 laps. My mom says it's important for my training." "Training for what?" "Swimming team. I'm going to be on the high school team when I get older." Sarah stood up, her mind racing. The girl's swimming technique was indeed impressive, suggesting formal instruction. But the whole situation felt increasingly surreal. Why would a talented young swimmer need to sneak into a stranger's pool? Why would her mother allow it? And how had this been going on for weeks without Sarah or Tom noticing? "Bella, I need you to get out of the pool right now," Sarah repeated, her voice firm but not unkind. "We're going to figure this out together, okay?" The girl hesitated, her dark eyes studying Sarah's face. Then, with a small sigh, she swam to the pool's edge and hauled herself out with fluid grace. Water streamed from her suit and hair, pooling on the non-slip surface around the pool deck. "Where are your towels?" Sarah asked. "I don't bring towels. I just let the sun dry me off." "How often have you been swimming here, Bella?" "Every morning, Monday through Friday. Sometimes on weekends too, if my mom has to work." Sarah felt her legs go weak. Every morning for weeks. How was that possible? She and Tom were early risers, typically up by 6:30 for their coffee and news routine. How had they missed this? "What time do you usually come?" "Around 6:15. My mom drops me off on her way to work." 6:15. Sarah typically wasn't downstairs until 6:45. The 15-minute window had been enough to keep the girl's presence hidden. "Bella, I need to ask you something important, and I need you to tell me the truth. Has your mom really been giving you permission to swim here?" The girl's composure finally cracked. Her lower lip trembled slightly, and she wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking much younger than her. 12 or 13 years. She said, ... Belle. Mike Castellanos arrived in exactly 9 minutes, his white Aquatech van screeching to a halt in the Martinez driveway, with an urgency that made the neighbors' curtains twitch. Sarah watched from her kitchen window as he practically fell out of the driver's seat, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by something that looked dangerously close to panic. Tom had wrapped Bella in one of Sarah's oversized beach towels and settled her at the patio table with a glass of orange juice and a granola bar. The girl seemed remarkably calm for someone whose secret had been exposed, though Sarah noticed. She kept glancing toward the gate as if expecting someone to appear. "Mike's here," Sarah called out, sliding the glass door open. Mike Castellanos had been maintaining their pool for 3 years, and in that time, Sarah had come to think of him as part of their extended family. He was a second-generation Mexican-American who'd taken over the business from his father, a man who took pride in his work and had never given them reason to doubt his integrity, which made his current state all the more alarming. His usually pristine polo shirt was wrinkled, as if he'd slept in it, and his normally neat black hair was disheveled. But it was his eyes that caught Sarah's attention. They held the haunted look of a man who'd been dreading this moment for weeks. "Sarah, Tom," he said, his voice hoarse. "I need to explain." "You're damn right you need to explain," Tom replied, his voice harder than Sarah had heard it in years. "There's been a child swimming in our pool every morning, and somehow her mother knew exactly where our key was hidden." Mike's gaze shifted to Bella, who was watching the exchange with the wide-eyed attention of someone trying to understand a conversation just beyond her comprehension. "Is that her? Is that Carmen's daughter? So you do know Carmen Reyes, Sarah," said I. Mike ran his hands through his hair, leaving it even more disheveled. "Christ, this is such a mess. I hoped it would never come to this." "Mike, sit down," Sarah said, her voice gentler than Tom's but equally firm. "Tell us what's going on." Mike pulled out one of the patio chairs and collapsed into it as if his legs could no longer support him. For a moment he just stared at his hands, his breathing shallow and rapid. "Carmen Reyes is my cousin," he said finally, "my father's sister's daughter. I haven't seen her in maybe 15 years, not since we were kids. Then, about 2 months ago, she showed up at my house." "Showed up how?" Tom asked. "Just ... appeared. She was driving this beat-up Honda with everything she owned packed in the back seat. She had Bella with her, and she was crying. Not just upset, completely falling apart. She said she'd left her husband, that he'd been— Mike's voice trailed off, and he glanced at Bella again. "That he'd been what?" Sarah prompted. "Hurting them, both of them. She showed me bruises on her arms, and Bella had this mark on her shoulder that looked like a handprint." Sarah felt her heart clench. She looked at Bella, who was methodically eating her granola bar, apparently absorbed in the task, but there was something too deliberate about the girl's focus, as if she were working hard to appear uninterested in the conversation. "So she came to you for help," Sarah said. "Yeah, she said she didn't have anywhere else to go. Her husband had cleaned out their bank account, and she was afraid to go to her friends because he might find her there. She begged me to let them stay, just until she could get back on her feet." "And you said yes," Tom said. "Of course I said yes. She's family, and seeing Bella like that, ... Mike's voice cracked. She was so quiet, so scared. She flinched every time I moved too fast. What was I supposed to do? Turn them away? Sarah understood the impulse, but something about the story didn't add up. "Mike, if Carmen was staying with you, why didn't she just ask us directly about using the pool? We would have said yes, especially under those circumstances." Mike's face flushed red. "Because she wasn't staying with me." "Not exactly." "What do you mean, not exactly?" "I mean, Jesus." Tom leaned forward. "What do you mean? Your wife doesn't know. Maria and we've been having problems. Real problems. She's been talking about divorce, about taking the kids and moving back to Phoenix with her mother. The last thing I needed was to bring home 2 more people to take care of, especially when we're barely keeping our heads above water as it is." "So where are Carmen and Bella staying?" Sarah asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. "In the shop. I have that little office space behind the garage where I keep my supplies. I set up a couple of cots, got them a hot plate and a mini fridge. It's not much, but it's temporary." Sarah tried to process this information. Mike was hiding his cousin and her daughter in his workshop, keeping them secret from his own wife. It was a recipe for disaster, but she could understand the impossible position he'd found himself in. "Okay," she said slowly, But that still doesn't explain the pool situation. Mike's flush deepened. She was going crazy, being cooped up in that little space all day. And Bella, she'd been on a swim team back in Phoenix. It was the one thing that made her happy, the one thing that helped her feel normal. Carmen kept asking if there was somewhere Bella could swim, somewhere safe where they wouldn't be seen. "And you thought of our pool," Tom said. "I thought about it for weeks before I said anything. You guys are always so generous, so understanding. I figured if I explained the situation." "But you didn't explain the situation," Sarah interrupted. "You gave Carmen our gate combination without asking us." I know how it sounds, but Carmen was getting desperate. She kept talking about moving on, about taking Bella and trying to make it in Los Angeles or San Francisco. And I could see what that would mean to people with no money, no connections, trying to survive in cities where they didn't know anyone. I was afraid they'd end up homeless, or worse. Mike's voice was gaining strength as he spoke, as if the act of confession was giving him energy. "I told myself I'd ask you guys about it eventually. I figured I'd wait until you got to know them a little bit, until you could see what good people they were. But then weeks went by, and everything seemed to be working out fine. Carmen found a job cleaning offices. Bella was happy with her swimming routine, and nobody was getting hurt. Nobody was getting hurt." Tom's voice was incredulous. "Mike, they were trespassing on our property every single day. Do you have any idea what kind of liability issues that creates? What if Bella had been injured? What if someone had seen her and called the police? I know, it was stupid. But I was caught in the middle, and I didn't know how to fix it without making everything worse." Sarah studied Mike's face, looking for signs of deception. His story was plausible, even sympathetic, but there were still gaps that bothered her. "Mike, where's Carmen now?" "At work, she cleans the office complex on Industrial Boulevard. She starts at 5 in the morning and usually finishes around 2. And she's been dropping Bella off here every morning." "Yeah, she drops her off at the entrance to your subdivision, and Bella walks the rest of the way. Then Carmen picks her up after work." "Picks her up where?" "Same place, the entrance to Willowbrook Drive." Sarah felt a chill. "Mike, that means Bella has been walking through our neighborhood alone twice a day for weeks. A 12-year-old girl that nobody recognizes, carrying a wet towel and pool equipment." 13, Bella said quietly. It was the first time she'd spoken since Mike's arrival, and all three adults turned to look at her. "I'm 13, and I don't carry pool equipment. I just swim and then wait for my mom." "Wait where?" Sarah asked. "Different places. Sometimes the park at the end of your street. Sometimes I just walk around and look at the houses. They're really nice houses." The image of Bella wandering their neighborhood alone for hours, killing time until her mother finished work, made Sarah's chest tighten. "Bella, what do you do when it rains?" "Find somewhere to wait. There's a covered pavilion at the park. Sometimes I go to the library if it's open." "The library is 3 miles from here," Tom said. "I like to walk," Bella replied simply. Sarah found herself looking at this girl, this 13-year-old, who'd been essentially abandoned in their neighborhood every day for weeks, with new eyes. Bella's composure wasn't just maturity, it was survival. She'd learned to navigate an adult world with minimal supervision to take care of herself in situations that would challenge many grown-ups. "Bella," Sarah said gently, "when did you last see your father?" The girl's face went carefully blank. "I don't want to talk about him." "That's okay. You don't have to. But I need to ask, are you and your mom safe? Are you still worried about him finding you?" Bella's response was immediate and emphatic. "He won't find us. My mom made sure of that." "What do you mean? She changed our names, and she got us new papers. She's really smart about stuff like that." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "Bella, what do you mean? She changed your names?" "I mean, we're not really Carmen and Isabella Reyes. Those are our new names. My mom said it was important to have new names, so my dad couldn't track." "U.S.?" Sarah looked at Mike, who had gone pale. "Mike, did you know about this?" "No. I mean, I knew she was using a different last name, but I figured she'd just gone back to her maiden name." "I didn't know, ... double quotes." "You didn't know what?" Tom demanded. "I didn't know she was us." Carmen Reyes arrived in 18 minutes, driving a Honda Civic that had seen better decades through the kitchen window. Sarah watched her sit in the driveway for a full minute before getting out, her hands gripping the steering wheel as if It were the only thing keeping her anchored to reality. The woman who finally emerged from the car bore little resemblance to the confident manipulator Sarah had imagined. Carmen was tall, as Bella had described, with long dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, but her face was gaunt, her clothes hung loose on her frame, and her movements carried the careful tension of someone who'd learned to expect trouble from every direction. She paused at the front door, her hand hovering over the doorbell, before apparently deciding to walk around to the backyard instead. Sarah met her at the pool gate, noting how Carmen's eyes immediately scanned the area, checking sightlines, identifying potential exits, cataloging threats with the efficiency of someone for whom such assessments had become second nature. "You must be Sarah," Carmen said, her voice carrying a slight accent that wasn't quite Mexican, wasn't quite anything Sarah could identify. I'm so sorry about all of this. "We need to talk," Sarah replied, keeping her voice neutral. "All of us." Carmen nodded and followed Sarah to the patio table where Tom, Mike, and Bella were waiting. The girl looked up as her mother approached, and Sarah caught a brief exchange between them, a look that conveyed volumes of information in just a few seconds. "Mama," Bella said quietly, "I told them about the swimming and about the names." Carmen's face went pale, but she didn't scold her daughter. Instead, she sat down heavily in the remaining chair, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "How much did they know?" she asked Mike. "They know about the false identities. They know you've been using their pool without permission. They know you're hiding from someone?" Mike's voice was strained. "Carmen, what the hell is really going on?" Carmen looked around the table, her gaze lingering on each face before settling on Sarah. "How much trouble am I in? That depends entirely on what you tell us right now," Sarah replied. "And I need you to understand, I have a family to protect. If you've brought danger to this neighborhood, I need to know." "I would never, ... double quotes Carmen started, then stopped. "I mean, I tried not to. But I know that by being here, by existing anywhere, there's always a risk." "A risk of what?" Tom asked. Carmen was quiet for so long that Sarah wondered if she'd decided not to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "My real name is Alina Vasquez. Bella's real name is Sophia. We're from El Paso, not Phoenix, and we're not running from an abusive husband." "Then what are you running from?" Sarah asked. Elena Carmen took a shuddering breath. "I was a court interpreter for the Federal District Court in El Paso. I specialized in narcotics cases, mostly involving the cartels that move drugs across the border. 3 years ago, I was assigned to interpret for a case involving the organization." Sarah felt her stomach drop. Even someone with her limited knowledge of current events knew that name, knew what it meant. The case involved a mid-level distributor who'd been caught with a massive shipment of fentanyl. The D was trying to flip him, get him to testify against his hopes. During the interrogation, I overheard something I wasn't supposed to. "Here, what kind of something?" Tom asked. "Names, locations, details about a shipment that was supposed to move through El Paso the following week. And I heard them talking about a federal judge who was supposedly on their payroll." The patio fell silent, except for the sound of the pool filter cycling. Sarah could feel her heartbeat in her ears. "I should have kept quiet," Alina continued. "That was my job, to interpret, not to listen. But the judge they mentioned, he was presiding over the case. He was the one who would decide whether the distributor's testimony was credible." "So you reported it," Mike said. I went to the FBI, thinking they'd want to know about the corruption. Instead, they told me I'd misunderstood what I'd heard. They said my Spanish wasn't good enough to accurately interpret complex criminal conversations." "But your Spanish is perfect," Bella said quietly. "You were born in Mexico City." Alina smiled sadly at her daughter. "Yes, Mia, my Spanish is perfect, which is why I knew exactly what I'd heard." "What happened next?" Sarah asked. "The judge threw out the distributor's testimony, said it wasn't credible. The case collapsed, and everyone involved walked free. 2 weeks later, that shipment moved through El Paso exactly as I'd heard them plan it. 3 kids died from fentanyl, overdoses that could be traced directly to that load." Sarah was beginning to understand the scope of what they were dealing with. "Alina, you're not just running from criminals. You're running from law enforcement to, I don't know who I can trust." The FBI agent who dismissed my concerns was either incompetent or compromised. The judge was definitely compromised. For all I know, half the federal courthouse in El Paso is on the cartel payroll. "So you ran," Tom said. "Not immediately. I tried to go back to work, tried to pretend nothing had happened, but then I started noticing things. Cars that seemed to follow me home. Phone calls where no one spoke. Men in suits asking my neighbors questions about my schedule." "When did you decide to leave?" Elena's face hardened. "When I came home from work one day and found my apartment had been searched, nothing was taken, but everything had been moved, just slightly. Someone had been through every drawer, every closet, every box. They'd even looked through Sophia's school papers. Did you call the police?" "I called the FBI, the same agent who'd dismissed my concerns. He said there was no evidence of a break-in, that maybe I'd just forgotten how I'd left things. He suggested I might be suffering from paranoid delusions brought on by stress." Sarah was appalled. "They gaslighted you. Classic technique. Make the witness question their own perceptions. If I started telling people I was being followed or that my home had been searched, it would be easy to paint me as unstable, unreliable. But you knew what you'd seen," Bella said fiercely. "You knew what was real." "Yes, Mia, I knew. But knowing and being able to prove it are two different things." Elena continued her story, describing how she'd started making preparations to disappear. She'd researched identity theft, learned how to obtain false documents, studied the patterns of people who'd successfully gone off the grid. She'd started slowly liquidating her assets, converting everything to cash. The final straw came when Sophia's teacher called me at work. She said 2 men had come to the school asking about Sophia's attendance patterns, wanting to know what time I usually picked her up. When I asked who they were, the teacher said they'd claimed to be from the district office, but they hadn't shown proper identification. Men were asking about me at school. Bella's voice was small. "Yes, baby. That's when I knew we had to leave immediately. I picked you up that day and told you we were going on a long trip. Remember?" Bella nodded. "You said we were going to see America? We've been seeing America for 10 months now, never staying anywhere longer than a few weeks, never using our real names, never leaving a paper trail." Sarah tried to process the magnitude of what Elena had endured. "How have you been surviving? Cash jobs, cleaning offices, houses, anything that doesn't require background checks or tax forms." "I kept enough money aside to get us basic necessities, but it's running out." "Is that why you came to Mike?" Elena looked at her cousin with a mixture of gratitude and guilt. "I was desperate. Sophia needed stability, needed a chance to feel like a normal kid for a little while. When I remembered that Mike lived in California, I thought maybe we could stay with him just long enough for me to figure out our next move." "But you didn't tell him the truth," Tom pointed out. "I told him enough. The abusive husband story wasn't completely false. Sophia's father was violent, and we did leave El Paso partly because of him, but that was years ago. He's not the real threat. The real threat is whoever killed those kids with the fentanyl you tried to stop," Sarah said. Elena nodded. "And whoever's been protecting them, which could be anyone from street dealers to federal judges, the weight of the situation settled over them like a heavy blanket." Sarah looked at Belesafio, this 13-year-old girl who'd been living under an assumed identity for nearly a year, who'd learned to pick locks and memorize escape routes, who'd been swimming in their pool while her mother worked to keep them both alive. "Elena," Sarah said carefully, "have you considered witness protection? You mean WITSEC?" "I tried, but the FBI agent handling my case said I didn't meet the criteria. He said I wasn't a direct witness to a crime, just someone who'd overheard a conversation. He said the program was for people who could provide testimony that would lead to convictions. But you could testify about the corruption with what? Proof. My word against the federal judges. My word against an FBI agent's. Even if they believed me, which they don't, what would I be testifying to? That I heard some people speaking Spanish in a courthouse. That I think there might be corruption in the system." Sarah realized Elena was right. Her situation was a prosecutor's. Nightmare a witness with explosive information but no concrete evidence, claiming corruption within the very system that would need to protect her. "So what's your plan?" Mike asked. "You can't keep running faux.